BBC Radio.
6 Music.
You are now entering parallel universe. And wipe your feet on the way in.
Marc Riley, BBC 6 Music.
Orbison with Pretty Woman, and I'm delighted to say I'm in the company of a pretty man.
Oh, mate. I wonder where you're going with that. I wish you had gone there. But, hey, thanks, I'm flattered. I was going to say the same thing.
Yo, mate.
Perfect, Peter's here.
Oh, I know, he's the gooseberry.
I know.
Would you mind leaving the room, Peter? Thank you very much indeed.
Oh, what a riff. That is. What a riff. Changing the subject. What a riff.
Changing the subject. Indeed. Yeah, what a riff.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? Supposedly, Roy Orbison wrote that in half an hour. You know, say all the great songs were written in, 20 minutes, half an hour. That's one of those, apparently.
And it does help when you've got one of the greatest voices ever.
Yes, no doubt about it. So we're looking at Melody Maker, 10th of October 1964 here. And on the front cover, Roy Orbison orbits to top spot, it says. Roy Orbison, America's reluctant pop star, was the toast of transatlantic show business this week as he topped the hit parade with Oh Pretty Woman. And the star, due in Britain later this month for TV dates, told Melody Maker, "I didn't care at all about becoming a big personality. I really just wanted to be a record seller, but now it's just happened all of a sudden. It seems like everybody wants me at once. I kind of feel like I'm hanging in there between it all." He didn't really seem like he wanted the stardom, did he? He couldn't, obviously, huge talent, and everybody adored him.
Yeah, have you seen the documentary about his life?
No, I haven't.
He had he had to deal with a load of tragedy throughout his life, but yeah, what a huge talent.
Yeah, it also says here, Roy has finally crashed the star appeal myth that pop stars can't be married. 28-year-old Roy is married with a son, more of which later. Also in the news, Sandy Shaw, in one of the most impressive bursts of international fame, 17-year-old singer Sandy Shaw this week rocketed to number 23 in the hit parade with Always Something There to Remind Me. The record is selling at the rate of 20,000 copies a day. That's not bad. And Sandy, who was discovered by Adam Faith, is being steered clear of personal appearances until she's gained more experience. She began the trail to showbiz when she burst into Adam Faith's dressing room one night and demanded he listen to her songs. One way of doing it.
Yeah, you just wonder how you get more experience if you don't let her do what she wants to do.
Well, that's
in the
the
end.
thing. Well, also in the news, the fantastic success story of the Motown Tamla Gordy labels continues in the US with 7 singles inside the top 100 by the Supremes, Martha and the Vandellas. Top 4 tops, Temptations, Marvin Gaye, Miracles and Eddie Holland. Most people in the business here are convinced the Motown sound will be big in Britain too very soon. It's weird, isn't it? Imagine a pop chart pre-Motown. It's informed so much stuff since.
Completely.
Yeah, and of course Lamont Dozier passed away recently.
That's right.
A lot depends on the Pretty Things' next single, Don't Bring Me Down, and one of their own numbers, Together, released next week. If it's a big hit, there'll be an EP to follow, and this might be released in America. Vocalist Phil May told Melody Maker, "We're hoping for a hit because this will lead to the EP, which might then be released in the States, with a tour to follow. We've already recorded a spot for the Jack Parr show." This is... Pretty Things never really got the breaks. I remember talking to Dick Taylor a few years ago, and the reason they didn't go to America was their manager, I think his name was Brian Morrison, decided that it was bands just lose money going to the States, so wasn't any point going there. So they organised a tour of New Zealand instead.
Sometimes it transpires that people can't go to certain territories for different reasons, and they are slightly smokescreen. Well, that did happen with Elvis Presley and Colonel Tom Parker, didn't it? Which was probably a completely different story.
Yeah.
But of course, I don't know who wrote Don't Bring Me Down, but Bowie did cover it on Pin-Ups, didn't he? Which would have been ka-ching for somebody.
Yeah, definitely. In related news, Little Richard, the America's Dean of Rock and Roll, should have opened a British tour at the Leeds Queen's Hall last Friday, but he failed to show up. Audiences were offered their money back as they pelted the stage with programmes, orange peel, sweets and pennies. On the stage at the time were the Pretty Things, who'd stood in at the last minute.
Right.
Tough. In London, a spokesman for the tour promoters, the Don Arden organisation, told Melody Maker, "We received a cable from Little Richard in New York on Friday saying he couldn't do the tour because he was sick. The cable came from New York, and as Richard lives in Los Angeles, we presumed he'd started the journey." And John Lee Hooker, it's hardly 3 months since John Lee Hooker was last in Britain, but even in that short time he's noticed a change in the local scene. As he waited to play on the TV show Ready Steady Go, he explained, "When I last came over, things were a big surprise. Now it's different again. More bluesmen have been over here from the States and they've gone over really well, and the kids know more about it. It's fantastic," he says. "They appreciate blues far more than American kids do, and they give it more respect here. I find that your younger people know the different songs and dig so deep into them, whereas all the American youngsters want to hear is rock and roll all day, and some of your groups are so good at it. I really dig that John Mayall group, and John Lee's Groundhogs are definitely my favourites. They're tremendously nice fellows and very good to work with.
I was going to say, so that's where they kind of
That's where it comes from. So Groundhogs Blues, that's where they got the band name, and of course they were touring with John Lee Hooker, and they called themselves John Lee's.
Yeah, they were a pickup band, weren't they, for various different blues artists. But of course, I mean, that's where you have to give credit to the likes of the Stones and John Mayall and everybody, because I mean, they were doing the blues from America, just kind of ripping it off, you know.
Of course they were.
But I mean, it worked for the original artists as well.
Yeah, it did all round. And Brian Epstein, he has a new book out, Cellar Full of Noise, in which he tells full story of meeting the Beatles and getting them a contract and shaping their career. It's a remarkable tale, say Melody Maker. What emerges forcefully is that the personalities of the four most famous boys in pop was no overnight gain. Epstein himself says, I've never actually made a star, but I am a demon for balancing the careers of my artists. He says when he first went to the Cavern in Matthew Street in Liverpool, where he saw the Beatles for the first time, he says, they weren't very clean or tidy. I'd never seen anything like the Beatles on stage. They smoked as they played, and they ate and they talked and pretended to hit each other. They turned their backs on the audience and shouted at them and laughed at private jokes.
All this from the grooming from having been at the Star Club in Hamburg, where you had to eat on stage because you were playing for 8 hours solid.
That's exactly it, yeah. It wasn't like an act. Yeah, that was their life.
Yeah, I know. We always go back to the Ruttles, don't we? But we said when Leggy Mountbatten first saw them at the Cavern, it said, oh, what was it? And it's Leggy Mountbatten's mum said, hey, it was the trousers.
Tight trousers. Anyway, I was going to get onto a serious point, but you've just undermined it. But Brian Epstein, talking about him, he said he's 30. It could be argued he can't be a particularly modest man for wanting to tackle his autobiography right now. Goes on to say, the answer to critics, though, inside and outside showbiz, is that Epstein is important more than anybody else on the showbiz map in the past few years. He's revolutionised not only the hit parade, but the thinking and, to a vast degree, the talking points of nations. It's a little bit hyperbole, but...
Well, you'd have to say, but, I mean, beyond that, there's also the story of him selling the rights to the Beatles merchandise for a pittance in America.
In the States, that's right.
Yeah.
You know, certain things he regretted, definitely. Talking of America, going to the US charts.
Right, okay. The Ronettes with Baby I Love You, and coincidentally, we have got Bob Hughes in tonight as well.
Oh, stop now. Looking at Melody Maker, 10th of October 1964. Wasn't even born.
Oh, bless, I was.
I know you were. It's singles. Keith Richard, as he was known then, does the blind date reviews. So that was when they just give people stuff to review without telling who the artists were, but usually they could guess. It's like Dionne Warwick and Mary Wells, Beach Boys, etc. Ray Coleman reviews the rest of them, including Martha and the Vandellas, Dancing in the Street. He says they've so far failed to crush Britain, and Dancing in the Street is in their familiar style of wailing voices and all happening backing. This is messy and no hit.
No.
How wrong can he be?
Absolutely.
Also out is the Shangri-Las Remember Walking in the Sand. Said it's sung by four girls from New York, and their harmony technique is right in line with current requirements. For added effect, the producers whipped in seagull noises to capture the sandy shore motif. This is, the producer being George Shadow Morton. This is before Shangri-Las, isn't it?
The Ledge. And do you know what does strike me about this edition of Melody Maker from 1964? If you look at the NME, and probably disc, was it? I don't know. But they were like pamphlets, as we say. They were so much smaller than the Melody Maker. There's a lot of meat in that for 1964.
I know.
Isn't there?
I think this was the main paper, wasn't it?
Was it? Right.
Yeah. Just going back to that tune, though, just talking about Perfect Peter probably know this, but interesting fact: Billy Joel made his debut on record playing piano.
Did he?
On that tune? Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Graham Bond. He says, "I'm not one of those people who's ashamed of playing blues and earning money out of it." A characteristic statement from Graham Bond, who admits his aggressive honesty frequently gets him into trouble. Graham, whose facial displacement of hair makes him look rather like a French postman, deserves full marks for calling his group the Graham Bond Organisation. I don't understand that comparison.
Right.
As a former modern jazz altoist, does he find the blues restricting? Certainly not, he says. It doesn't have to be 12 bar. You can play so many different sequences or no sequence at all. Talk about freedom. There is a tremendous parallel with the blues because it's so free. There's no reason at all why you can't take the blues and put the technique of modern jazz on it. After all, the greatest bluesman of all time was Charlie Parker. He has a point here. This was kind of, 1964. It's the start of the R&B boom, isn't it? But people are melding blues and jazz together really for the first time for a white audience anyway in this country.
Right. And am I right? I don't know. I've got something in the back of my mind saying that the Graham Bond Organisation was quite a fraught outfit.
It was. He kind of alludes
There's a lot
to
of fighting
this.
going on.
There was.
Yeah.
There was. He's kind of alluded. It's Graham got the blues bug when he heard Alexis Corner's band. He says there was Ginger Baker, Cyril Davis, Jack Bruce, and Dick Hextall Smith. Ginger, Jack, and Dick are with me now. It was the embodiment of most of the things I really wanted. I joined Alexis, and it was a marvellous tuition. If it were not for him and Cyril Davis, this scene wouldn't have been what it is today. Cyril Davis, who died young, often kind of airbrushed out, not really sort of given the kudos he deserves for how influential he was. He says the organisation is a cooperative group, no star, and everybody is dispensable. The point about our musical policy and presentation, at least 90% of it, is completely improvised. So you've got Ginger and Jack going on, some big personalities in there. Graham Bond himself too.
And it's a Graham Bond organisation.
Yeah, he's got his name on it.
Yeah.
But I think Ginger Baker was responsible for collecting the money after gigs. So there was a lot of stuff going on.
Well, if Ginger Baker asked you for some money, you'd give it him, wouldn't you?
You would. And the British invasion, bear in mind this is 1964, American record fans have gone overboard for British pop, it says. The biggest transatlantic talking points in show business is the fact that loads of British artists are in the American charts, spearheaded by the Beatles, of course. Various commentators give their opinions, including Brian Matthew of Saturday Club. He says, personally, I don't expect it to go on for a very long time. The Beatles have got something genuine and original to offer, but let's not forget the roots of their music are American. I don't see how much longer we can go on playing American games better than the Americans can. So it's that idea, we mentioned before, which is obviously sort of easy in retrospect, isn't it? People that we were kind of selling American music back to the people who created it in the first place.
Coles to Newcastle kind of thing, yeah.
And where am I going now?
We're going to Prince Buster.
Oh, yeah.
30 pieces of silver. We've talked about influential before, Bob. Prince Buster, 30 pieces of silver, you would have to say.
No doubt about it. So we're looking at Melody Maker, 10th of October 1964. So Roy Orbison's on the cover. More on centre pages. It's moving into his dream house. In the next fortnight, the Orbison family will move into the house that he told Melody Maker readers about recently. And from what I've heard from, I can't remember who's, I think it's Ray Coleman, I think. From what I've heard from Roy's British agent, Peter Walsh, it's even more fantastic than Roy said it would be. It's a real gas, says Peter, who's just returned from a trip there. Built on 2 acres of ground on the side of a mountain, which runs down to Lake Hickory. Even has an electric lift built from outside the house down to the lake where it has his speedboat. As you approach it, you think it's a bungalow, but as you get nearer, you realise it's built on 2 levels, and he wasn't kidding about having a swimming pool built in his living room either. In fact, he's got 2, one for him and his wife, and the other 2 for the children.
Wow.
The house has 6 bathrooms, all designed individually, and a beauty salon too. It's just it's one of the most unusual things in the whole house. It's a TV set which swings down from the bedroom ceiling. All Roy does is press a switch, and there it appears out of the blue. He also has a very impressive collection of model planes, it says here, which I think is a bit of a recurring thing for rock stars, isn't it? Rod Stewart was into trains, Neil Young as well. No, John Prine had a train set. It's
really?
One of those, yeah. Gigs this week, got Jerry and the Pacemakers, Billy J. Kramer and Dakotas at Walthamstow, Granada. Rolling Stones at Brighton Hippodrome, Shirley Collins at the Star and Garter in Bromley, Wiz Jones at the Black Horse in Rathbone Place, West London. At the 100 Club, Graham Bond organisation. 3 nights later, the Birds, which is Ronnie Wood's early band, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Birds with an I. Then the Pretty Things. Downliners Sect at the Bromley Court Hotel in Kent. Little Walter at the British Legion Hall in South Harrow. The Supremes at the Flamingo All-Nighter. The Yardbirds at the Crawdaddy in London. Where else? Long John Baldry and the Hoochie Coochie Men with Rod Stewart. That's very early days, isn't it? The Marquee.
Yeah, I'm just talking of the Downliners Sect. I'm going to be playing them tomorrow night. I'm going to be giving out the details for a gig at the weekend with Fallen Leaves, which is a benefit for Don Crane. It's kind of a remembrance thing going on there. So, that's coming tomorrow.
Lovely, okay, fantastic. Dusty Springfield at the Adelphi in Slough. And couldn't believe this lineup. The American Blues Festival featuring Lightning Hopkins, Sleepy John Esters, Sugar Pie DeSanto, Sunnyland Slim, Howlin' Wolf, Hubert Sumlin, Willie Dixon and Sonny Boy Williamson playing at Manchester Free Trade Hall.
You know, that is one of those things where you go to that gig and just tick so many off in one night. It's unreal, isn't it? I remember going to see 1 gig in Liverpool in the Big Top, and I am going back 20 years, but it was Jerry Lee, and it was Little Richard, and also Chuck Berry.
Oh, really?
In one night, you just tick them all off.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And in the mailbag, this just made me chuckle. Melody Maker's Chris Roberts is right to focus attention on the current state of machines taking over in the world of pop. Modern recording techniques make it quite impossible to judge any merits of the artist. A far cry from the sweet melodies and vocal artistry that we heard in the big band era from H. Reynolds of Gloucester. This is 1964. I mean, at best, it was three-track technology, wasn't it? Four-track didn't come in until maybe mid-65, 66.
Is that right? Okay.
All of it going on. And classified ads, just one to remember, Big Jim Sullivan and Joe Moretti demonstrating guitars in a free guitar sort of like workout showcase in Hammersmith. Legends.
Big Jim Sullivan played on all those great records.
He did, yeah. It was Big Jim and Little Jim, wasn't it, with Jimmy Page and all the rest of it.
That's right.
But, yes, but anyway, there we are. That was it.
Okay, so yeah, good work, Bobbert. Thank you very much indeed, and to you, Perfect Peter, and to Gaz and Michelle. And we're going to play Bob Dylan now, All I Really Want to Do, and you will be hearing Deb Grant next, and she's going to have a great show. I just know I can feel it in my water.
I don't wanna fake you out, take or shake or forsake.
Prepare to exit the parallel universe.
Marc Riley,
BBC Six Music.
And shut the door on your way out.